Hi, it's Sarah here from Thriving Solo, and today we're going to be taking a little look at your client intake process and why it matters. So, first of all, what is a client intake process? It's the process of collecting information from your clients and using it to provide them with the healthcare services that they need. That information includes demographic information, clinical information, and financial information to be able to bill them, for example. So if your intake process isn't as efficient as it should be, then that can cause you and the client stress. It could lead to missed information that is critical to their care, and it can result in a lot of lost time for you. Now, we're not here primarily as office managers, we're here to provide our clients with the best care that we can. So the idea of this session is to just talk a little bit about how we can make the intake process less overwhelming and more calming for both of us, for both us as practitioners and our clients. So what a good client intake process looks like is very much a multi-step process so that you're not overwhelming the client all at once. It actually starts wherever the client makes first contact with you. So if that's your website or a Facebook page or anything like that, they should all be starting to set up expectations for the client of what they can get from you in terms of levels of care and also, what they're going to be expected to do to fulfill their end of the bargain, filling out forms, turning up on time, things like that. The next point of contact can often be what it's normally called in marketing circles as a discovery call. I called mine within my practice a free 15-minute consultation, but it was a discovery call. It's a chance for the client to find out more about you, how you work, and for you to find out a little about the client. So those are the first two steps before we actually get to the bit that most people think of as the intake process, and that is a form that you require the client to fill in. And what we need is a safe way to gather that information, their health details and privacy information. So we need to make sure that whatever system we're using is something that is safe and secure and will fulfill any regulatory requirements. Following that, I had an initial assessment. It can just go straight to their main appointment if that is what works for your setup. But I used to have an initial assessment so that I could delve a little bit deeper into some of the questions that they'd already answered in their intake form. Things that I didn't want to be putting into the form because it made it more complex and wouldn't apply to everybody, but things that I nevertheless needed to follow up with them. So the intake process should also have easy booking steps with logical instructions so that the client always knows what comes next, what do they need to do next, and you have a minimal amount of back and forth messages or paperwork going back and forth. What we can do next is take a look at what your current process is. How can you measure and improve your intake process? What is the client completion rate for your current process? Of all the clients that book, how many send back completed intake forms before their appointment? Are they sending them back incomplete? Are they sending them back on time? If you're having to follow up a lot, then you might need to simplify some of your forms or some of the instructions. Another important measure is how much time do you spend taking a client through the onboarding, through intake. So from client contact to having them all set up and actually receiving treatment, how long does that take? And are there any steps that slow that down? Now, that does need to take account of your client and the speed that they can go at, but it's worth just checking that and seeing, is there a way to simplify this and speed it up while still getting the minimum information that you need? Are there common questions or errors? Are there things that people fill in incorrectly on a regular basis that show that perhaps the question's not clear enough? Are there questions that they're raising when they come for their appointment that you could cover in those first bits of paperwork? And what is the no-show and reschedule rate? If clients often miss appointments or forget paperwork, then have you got reminders or emails that you can send that will help them with that? 5 potential signs that your intake process needs a little bit of help are that clients miss key steps or show up to their appointment confused, or you spend ages chasing forms or answering repeated questions, or personal health comes in by text, email, or chat, in which case, that is not a safe and secure method of them sending the information. It could be that you feel tired just thinking about the admin side, or that paperwork is stacking up and takes time away from treatments. If any of those apply, then it's worth looking at how we can improve the intake process. And once you've got an idea of where the hiccups are happening, then you've got somewhere that you can go to make some small tweaks that could have a big impact. You may be able to shorten or combine forms. It could be worth sending reminders so that people know exactly, when their forms need to be in. I always made it very clear that an appointment for a treatment couldn't go ahead until I had had those intake forms submitted. It's worth offering digital and paper options. It'll depend very much on your client base, but as I've said, I had some elderly clients that didn't work with IT, and in those instances, I would walk through the intake forms with them. I would actually, if they needed me to, fill them in for them and then get them to read and check and sign the forms in my presence. So the other thing is clarifying language, making sure that it's simple language that everybody can understand rather than possibly some of our clinical language that we tend to get into the habit of. And automate wherever possible. So, for example, my intake forms were actually included in my Jane system, my admin system, and it meant that I could just automatically send those out, knowing that they were being sent securely. The link that the client clicked on made it that it was a secure site that they were attaching to fill in the forms. They weren't just going via email. And so that actually made everything a lot more straightforward for me. I would suggest blocking out admin time once a week so that it doesn't sort of eat into time with your clients to work through intake processes. And if you're able to, then batch responses to new client queries so that you're able to stay on focus and be able to be in the zone when you're answering questions, and celebrate every time somebody says that the intake process was nice and easy and straightforward and they understood it. So thank you for your time today. We are going to be looking at a step-by-step outline for the actual intake forms, but as I say, the intake process is really so much more than that. So have a little look this week at your own intake process and have a think about whether or not there are some ways that you could improve it, streamline it. It is well worth putting the time in the first place. It's something that sets up the relationship between you and your client. So I would very much recommend spending some time on this area. Thank you for stopping by.